Hey everybody, welcome to video 34. Today we get to dive a little bit deeper into what lies deep to the cerebrum, and we get to take a look at structures of the diencephalon, your midbrain, and things like the spinal cord. So your diencephalon is going to be this middle area that's sitting right here. All information except for olfaction, your sense of smell, is going to pass through the diencephalon, which has two regions, di meaning two. It has the thalamus region, where you're going to have all sensory information, again, except for olfaction, passing through. And you have the hypothalamus, which is going to be involved in regulating the anterior pituitary gland and is going to play a role in memory and emotion. So for your thalamus, it's going to sit right here, and I may even have a picture. There we go. That thalamus is going to sit right here. That's going to be very important for all of your sensory information. In fact, most of it's going to relay a lot of sensory information to and from the cortex. And your hypothalamus right here is going to be responsible for monitoring this anterior pituitary gland, this little bit that is coming off the side right here. We haven't talked about the anterior pituitary gland, but we will during our endocrine system video, because this is one of the most important endocrine glands you have in the entire body. Moving past the diencephalon, and I can actually separate it here to make this a little bit easier to see. So we have that diencephalon here, and then we get down to the brain stem. Now the brain stem has two parts, or you can consider it as three. You'll see it both ways. You have the midbrain and the hindbrain. Sometimes you'll see the hindbrain broken up into the pons and the medulla. But the brainstem is going to be responsible for connecting the cerebrum, the brain up here, to the spinal cord, which is what's going to be coming off the inferior portion right here. So this is leading into the spinal cord. But your midbrain is going to be responsible for coordinating many of your senses. It's very, very close to that thalamus we have here, controlling that sensory information. The pons here, and we'll have a picture where you might be able to see a little bit better than you can on the video, is going to connect the cerebellum, this heart shape coming out the backside here, to your brain stem. And the medulla is going to be responsible for regulating your cardiopulmonary rates, so things like your breathing rate, your heart rate, and it does so in addition with the pons superior. So here you can see that midbrain is kind of this little curl that's sitting right here. The pons is going to be the fat little belly. And then you have the medulla, sometimes also called the medulla oblongata, is the inferior most portion of the brainstem. The cerebellum coming off the posterior side here. So this posterior, so if I was to organize this, it would be sitting back here. Is going to be responsible for basically think of it like your balance. It's going to take the sensory information that you have, like if you're walking on uneven ground. Your eyes are going to sense that the ground is uneven. Your feet are not going to necessarily be level as they're walking. You might also have some proprioceptors noticing that you're leaning forward a little bit, leaning back a little bit. And it's going to compare that sensory information with the motor information being sent from the brain. So, for example, your motor cortex telling your legs to just do their normal walking gait. And it'll compare the two, and if there's a difference between what it's sensing or between what your body is sensing and what your body is being told to move, it is going to fix them. So it's going to say, hey, we're walking on uneven ground. We need to account for this. We need to account for this. And it's going to fix the motor response so that you don't trip and fall while walking on uneven ground. So again, that's just what I said right there. You can see that cerebellum has lots and lots of white matter on the inside. You can't see it on the video here, but you can see it on the picture where it has that deep cerebellar white matter, also called the arbor vitae, or the tree of life, just because it looks like a very, very fancy tree. and you can see an MR. I believe this is an MRI picture where the cerebellum is marked in purple. Now for your spinal cord, I don't have a model of the spinal cord, so we're just going to have to go off the slides and pictures here. Has various regions that are named according to where in the vertebrae your spinal cord or the spinal nerves are exiting. So it's going to go through a cerebellar region, there will be a thoracic region, there will be a lumbar region, and towards the lumbar and sacral region, you're going to get what's called the cauda equina, which translates as the horse tail, because if you were to look at all of those sacral nerves, it's going to look like a very wiry, long bundle of hairs, sort of like you can picture a horse's tail looking like, and so that's where it gets its name. Within the spinal cord, you're going to have gray matter and white matter separated from one another. The gray matter is going to be in the shape of an H and is going to have an anterior or ventral. Remember, anterior means ventral or the belly side. Especially, it becomes much more important when you're dealing with four-legged animals. And it will have a dorsal or a posterior horn. Anterior horn is going to be responsible for sending motor signals, so you're going to have a lot of messages moving down that anterior horn, while the posterior horn is going to be responsible for the sensory information going up to your brain. You do also have a third horn called the lateral horn. It's mainly going to be the soma of autonomic nervous system motor neurons, so things that like your digestive organs, those muscles that need to be able to move and be controlled, is going to run through that lateral horn. White matter is not going to be separated into horns. It's going to be separated into columns. You have an ascending tract, which is going to carry sensory information up to the brain, and then you have a descending tract that's going to carry motor information from the brain. So you can see how those horns and those columns are going to be responsible for either motor sensory down, or motor information down, or sensory information up. And so you can see here, this is a diagram. This is a really good diagram where you have the posterior, so you know that's going to be on the back side of the spinal cord. You have the anterior horn. You can see these little tiny lateral horns coming off the side here for ANS neurons. And then you have the posterior column and the anterior column going to be making your your ascending and your descending tracts. And here is a stained image under a microscope, just so you can see it in real life as well. And so that is what we're going to cover for the diencephalon, the midbrain, hindbrain, brainstem, as well as the spinal cord. There's a lot more things going on, especially in the spinal cord, that we aren't going to cover in this class. When it comes to the diencephalon, when we start talking about the endocrine system and the anterior pituitary gland, we're going to get a little bit deeper into those areas of the brain. But as always, if you have questions, let me know. Post on the updates tab on Schoology, and look forward to our next video.